The video that we are going to be taking care of today. Today, we are going to be doing a response to the Reformed Wiki video, or it's a video that's featured on the Reformed Wiki channel, called, Is the God of the Bible Immoral? And if so, by what standard? Now, I'm 95% certain this is going to be an appeal to objective morality or something like that. So let's go ahead and see how it ends up stacking up. So let us see here.
A common argument against Christianity and the Bible is that the God of the Bible is immoral. For example, popular atheist Richard Dawkins writes this in The God Delusion. The God of the Old Testament is arguably the most unpleasant character in all fiction. Jealous and proud of it, a petty, unjust, unforgiving control freak, a vindictive, bloodthirsty ethnic cleanser, a misogynistic, homophobic, racist, infanticidal, genocidal, filicidal, pestilential, megalomaniacal, sadomasochistic, capriciously malevolent bully.
It's not untrue, but okay, let's maybe break this down. So, is the God of the Bible bloodthirsty? Well, how bloodthirsty do you have to be to commit a genocide? He's committed a few of those in the Bible, so he's definitely that. Ethnic cleansing, literally, he argued to destroy the Canaanites and their entire culture, so he's definitely that. Vindictive, depending on your operative definition of vindictive, he definitely fits that. Let's go ahead and do a fun thing here, just to make sure. Vindictive, having or showing a strong, unreasoning desire for revenge. I would say any god that creates hell is looking for vengeance and punitive measures, so yeah, we'll go with that. Misogynistic, the rules of the Bible definitely were very against women, so definitely that. Homophobic, if you accept the worst definitions of Leviticus, then yes, that is true. Racist, I refer back to the ethnic cleansing of the Canaanites. Infanticidal, it literally argues for people to dash the skulls of babies on the ground, and also there were definitely babies when the Great Flood happened. So that is definitely there. Let's see here. Filicidal, again, he's killed infants, so children would happen as well. Pestilential, if you're going to argue that the God of the Bible, and the God of the Old Testament specifically, is not pestilential, then I would like to refer to you to the 10 plagues of Egypt. By the way, those are 10 plagues that were caused by his doing and his doing alone, because it even says in the Bible that he hardened the Pharaoh's heart. So we're going to go ahead and go with, yeah, he's definitely that one. Megalomaniacal, anybody that believes themselves to be so self-important that all of this shit is warranted is definitely a megalomaniac. Sadomasochistic, I don't know if I'd call him a masochist. I definitely would call him a sadist, but it's hard for me to argue he's a masochist unless you accept Trinitarianism to be true, in which case God involved himself directly in torture porn. So he could get pegged by a bunch of Romans. I guess then it would follow through, but I don't know if he really enjoyed it. So I don't know if I'd really put that there. And then I guess he's a capricious, malevolent bully. If you agree with everything behind here, then that's just kind of the end result, like the logical end result of what you would get with that. So I'm okay accepting that. But let's see if they have an argument against it. Because I'm fairly certain the argument's going to be, by what standard is he these things?
The purpose of this video isn't to specifically address each of these accusations.
Well, that's good. That would be really awkward if that was what they tried to do.
But rather to talk more generally about standards of morality, since the issue of the Bible's morality is ultimately about worldviews. Of course, there are certainly answers to everything Dawkins mentions.
Wait, if there are answers to everything Dawkins mentions, then why not answer those?
And we'll explore those answers in other videos.
Oh, but those videos aren't produced yet? Okay, that's fine.
When someone says that the God of the Bible is immoral, two fundamental questions that need to be asked are, 1. By what moral standard are you judging the God of the Bible to be immoral? And 2. Is the moral standard you are using a legitimate moral standard by which you can judge the God of the Bible to be immoral?
Yep. Okay, so this is basically going to argue against This is basically going to try to go that God gets to define morality. He gets to do the ultimate moral standard thing. Therefore, the God of the Bible's morals. You can't judge the God of the Bible by their moral standard. But this is to accept this argument to be true. We would have to accept that merely by being an authority figure, which God most certainly would be, per the Bible, merely by being an authority figure or merely by bringing you into existence, we have to accept everything you do as good or moral. Or we have to accept your moral judgments expressly. But by this logic, we'd have to accept the same things for our parents. We'd have to accept the same things for our world leaders. We'd have to accept those things. And we don't have to. And there's a couple reasons why. For one, God is all-knowing, and he's all-powerful. If we accept the triomni God of the Bible to be true, then he is all-knowing, all-powerful, and all-good. If he's all-knowing, then he also has infinite creativity. He knows every creative outcome. He knows every creative measure. So he can conceive of a world in which all of the horrible things that he ended up directly causing didn't have to happen. And if you want to argue that God didn't directly cause things because of sin being the functional way that these things happened, then you have to engage in the counter-argument first. And that is that there's this thing called logical consequence. When I've referred to logical consequence on this channel multiple times, I've usually said it's the principle of entailment. But if you look it up, it's logical consequence. Logical consequence argues that if you have knowledge of the end result of an action, then you are responsible for the consequences of those actions, because it is a logical consequence of those actions. If I fire a gun at somebody and the bullet happens to kill them, I'm responsible for the logical consequence of them being killed by the bullet. Well, if God is omniscient, then any bad thing that has ever happened has happened as a logical consequence of the actions that God has taken at some point in time, which means that he is ultimately responsible for every good and every bad thing, because that is how the argument from logical consequence follows. This is not even engaging in the moral argument at all. But if we accept that things like killing people is wrong, and God has engaged in killing people, then by God's own standards, the only way that he could argue that it's okay that he killed people is by special pleading for himself. Which, again, I refer you to the arguments about world leaders and parents. The fact that they brought you into existence, the fact that they are authority figures over you, that doesn't mean anything as far as whether or not we can judge them. And if you're going to tell me that a being who is currently doing something that negatively affects me, that I cannot judge them on any moral standard of mine, that's incorrect. I can and will. I have the capacity to. I have the ability to. Now, as for an argument, they have not presented ultimate authority as an argument in this video yet, but I'm going to go ahead and hit that one real quick. By what standard can we judge God's actions? Well, there's a few standards we can do it by. We can judge God's actions by the sliding scale of intent versus consequences. We can look at that scale and go, okay, well, the intent of this was... the intent of a given action was good, but the consequences were bad, and the consequences were so astronomically bad that they outweigh any good you intended. For instance, if I'm driving down the road to go get groceries, my intent is good, but if I happen to hit somebody with my car on accident on the way there, my consequences were bad. I am judged more on my consequences than my intent. It's not necessarily murder, it's manslaughter, that kind of thing. The same thing has to be applied to God here. And if we're going to accept the idea that we're going to hold God accountable for logical consequences, because he's omniscient, so he has to be, the rule with logical consequences, you have to know that a given action will lead to a given outcome, or at least be reasonably aware. But if he's omniscient, he knows. He doesn't even have to be reasonably aware. He knows, flat out. Growlithe, come here. I cannot keep taking you out. I cannot walk you every 30 minutes. I cannot. I really can't. I love you, but I can't do that. And I can't just let her outside because our fence is destroyed because of the weather. So that's fun. So when we're looking at this, if the only standard that a Christian is going to accept is going to be God's standard of morality, not any other standard that man has created. If God does not participate in society, which is where we do our whole moral business, is where we have our moral discussions, if he does not actually participate in these things at all, then he has no business constructing immorality for us. This would be like saying that a random alien who just so happened to engage in panspermia has the final say in what is or is not moral for humans to engage in. And I don't believe that that's true. I believe that it's functionally is within the society itself. Is that subjective? Yes. Oh, wow, that fell. I'll fix that after this video. But yeah, no, you can judge from a moral system that is a measurement between intent and consequence. So, did God intend to kill billions of people? Well, no. But did he create a world in which billions of people were killed? Yes. And did he know that the world he was creating would lead to that? Yes. So it doesn't matter that he intended to kill them or not. What matters is that he knew they would die as a direct result of his actions. That's what matters. And if somebody wants to argue that I can't say that killing is immoral, then please, up yours. Quite frankly, up yours. Okay, continuing.
Most likely, the moral standard used to argue against the Bible's morality is a secular moral standard. Wikipedia has this list of secular moral frameworks. Consequentialism, which starts with goals and includes probably the most well-known moral framework, utilitarianism. Free thought, which doesn't seem to have any specific examples here.
Are you going to use something besides Wikipedia? Because, like, I would have gone to the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. I would not have gone just to fucking Wikipedia. But okay.
Secular humanism, which focuses on the way human beings can lead happy and functional lives, and posits that human beings are capable of being ethical and moral without religion or God. So, in future videos, we'll aim to do two things. First, evaluate the validity of the various non-biblical moral standards that are used to judge the God of the Bible to be immoral.
Okay.
We would argue that all of these non-biblical moral standards fail in some way.
Yes, because there is no more. Okay, so let's unpack that real quick. Even if every moral standard fails in some way, which is true, no moral standard is perfect. There is no moral standard that has not left some stone unturned. This is why we've had arguments about morality for thousands of years, dating back to fucking Aristotle and Plato. We've had arguments about this for as long as we've been able to construct societies and think of laws, right? The fact that a moral standard can fail does not matter because God's moral standard can fail. The only way that it does not have the capacity to fail is that it's written as a presupposition for God's moral standard, God's objective standard, which would be DCT, that it cannot fail. They're not necessarily making the argument for DCT here, but that's kind of the de facto argument that you fall into, right? So, if you're going to argue that all these moral standards fail, therefore God's is correct, well, no. Because I can put any moral standard at the end of that spectrum and say, utilitarianism fails because consequentialism covers a base that utilitarianism fails at. Except that utilitarianism can cover a base that consequentialism fails at. Secular humanism can cover a base that divine command theory fails at, etc. They all have bases where they fail. That is how morality works. This is why we do not have a definitive, final thought process on morality. Now, does this mean that morality is subjective? No, that's not how that works either. It's the people who try to fight objective morality with subjective morality and subjective morality with objective morality are playing this at a white belt level. They are arguing morality from the very first basic ideas of morality that you learn before you ever even crack open a philosophy book, before you ever even study any type of moral structures that have been posited by people before. So don't stick at the base level of the conversation where you go objective versus subjective. That's the basic level. That conversation is incredibly boring. Don't do that. Please elevate the conversation when we're talking about actual moral structures. Please go read the SCP. Please go read even the IEP, the Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy. Please go, like, crack open some books. Go read. A good one is called The Philosopher's Toolkit that goes over just some basics. Go do some reading and then come back and engage in these conversations because they're fascinating. But if the aim of the video is going to be to say, we're going to talk about in other videos why all this stuff fails, and therefore this morality is good, no, you have to back this one first. This one does not just get to be at the end of the road because you arbitrarily set it there.
And second, answer specific objections against the morality of the God of the Bible.
If you engage in cherry picking, you can answer specific objections to anything theologically. You can do this for literally any theology. You can do this for any character in fiction at all. Let's take Harry Potter's Voldemort. Harry Potter's Voldemort was ultimately a product of a shitty environment. He grew up in an orphanage. He grew up functionally without the ability to empathize with people because he was born of a marriage of lust and using a potion to basically engage in date rape, which is also the same story used for Esmeralda and Wicked. Funnily enough, Wicked Witch of the West, same story with her. But the fact that there is a frame that can explain their actions does not mean they are justified in their actions. So I will look at other videos from Reformed Wiki and go through the arguments that they present in other videos. But the mere fact that you can argue the reasons why somebody engaged in an action, any fictional character at all, including the Christian God, who, if we're accepting the Bible, then we're going to treat them as if they were any other fictional character, not to be insulting, but to judge them against the merits we would any other written character, because at least insofar as the Bible's concerned, they are a written character. If you write a fan fiction about me, the me that exists in that fiction is a character that exists separate from me, the person. So we'll see what they do in later videos, but I do want to go ahead and say that it doesn't matter necessarily that there are justifications they can use, or there are arguments they can use. That doesn't necessarily mean that something is 100% justified, that a being is justified in slaughtering millions, billions even. None of that logically comes from the writing that's in the Bible, aside from God said that everything's good, so therefore it's good. But we'll see. We'll see if there's anything more substantial. Hope you guys enjoyed that, and that is the end of this one.